just days after my wife's funeral. My son leaned forward and told me my home was too much for a man my age. His wife nodded, already planning my future. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I let them talk, because every word they spoke was sealing what would happen next. Before I take you through how this unfolded, do me a small favor. Support this story by subscribing and telling me in the comments where you're watching from. It helps voices like mine reach people who need to hear them. My name is Samuel Carter. I am 73 years old, retired after 4 decades as a federal logistics supervisor, and until recently I believed I had earned the right to age with dignity. 2 weeks after we laid my wife Eleanor to rest in Jacksonville, Georgia, my children came to my home for what they called a family discussion. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They arrived with folders. My coffee sat untouched as my son Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the same oak table Eleanor had refinished by hand 20 years earlier. His wife Claire, neat and composed in beige slacks, nodded along like this meeting had been rehearsed. "Dad," Marcus said, slow and firm, "this house is too much for you now. We've already spoken to someone." I listened. That was my first mistake in their minds. Silence. They mistook it for surrender. "You're lucky we're willing to help," Claire added, sliding documents across my table. "At your age, managing property can get overwhelming. At your age, not after your loss, not because we care. Just a number, one they could use." They spoke about buyers, renovations, numbers. They assumed debt. Assumed Eleanor's medical bills had drained us. Assumed I was one bad month away from collapse. They never asked. They calculated. That night, after they left, I walked into Eleanor's study for the first time since the funeral. The room still smelled faintly of citrus polish and her lavender soap. Her desk was immaculate. Too immaculate. Eleanor never left things unfinished. The bottom drawer resisted when I pulled it open. Inside, beneath old tax folders and greeting cards, I found a slate blue file. Heavy, intentional. A yellow note rested on top in her handwriting. "When they circle, don't argue. Move." I sat down. Inside were bank statements I didn't recognize. Accounts in Eleanor's name alone. Small amounts, spread carefully. Then property documents. My chest tightened when I read the heading. A coastal villa in Lagos, Portugal. Purchased 9 years earlier. Sole owner, Eleanor May Carter. No mention of me. A letter followed from a Lisbon legal firm confirming valuation and privacy protections. At the bottom, in Eleanor's hand, "Not yet. Keep quiet." There were insurance policies. One new, one small. Beneficiary, Naomi Carter, my granddaughter. Not Marcus. Not my daughter Renee. Then a letter. "Sam, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm right, the pressure's already started. They won't come for you with cruelty. They'll come with concern. They'll say they're helping. They're not. They're managing. The house is paid off. I made sure of it. But they will try to convince you that independence is dangerous. That's why there's another option. Portugal is yours if you need distance. Instructions are enclosed. Sometimes the only way to keep your life is to step out of reach." My hands were steady. My heart was not. Eleanor had been watching them long, before I had. The next morning Marcus called at 6 sharp. "We found a buyer. This is a smart move." I thanked him. I said I'd think about it. Then I ended the call. An hour later, Claire arrived uninvited with a leather portfolio and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She spread diagrams across my kitchen table. Plans for a basement conversion. Pastel walls. A kitchenette. A lockable door. "Your own space," she said. "Privacy, but still close to family." A cage with paint. When Renee arrived later, still in her nursing scrubs, she wouldn't meet my eyes. The meeting, I learned, had already happened without me. Decisions made. My life itemized. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about care. It was about control. That afternoon, alone again, I locked Eleanor's study door and read everything twice. At the back of the folder was a typed page with a Lisbon contact and a key taped to it. Beside the key, Eleanor had written, "Trust Sophia Mendez. She owes me everything." I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I made a list. What they knew, what they didn't. By sunset, the second list was longer. They believed I was a tired old man standing at the edge of his life, waiting for guidance. They had no idea I had already built an exit. The morning after I found Eleanor's blue folder, I woke before dawn, the house quiet except for the slow ticking of the hallway clock. I made coffee and drank it this time, standing at the sink, watching the backyard oak sway gently in the early light. For the first time since the funeral, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt watchful. I carried a legal pad to the kitchen table and drew a line down the center. On the left, what they assume. On the right, what is true. They assumed the house still had a mortgage. It didn't. They assumed Eleanor's treatments had wiped us out. They hadn't. They assumed grief had softened me. Grief had sharpened me. By the time the sun crept over the roofline, I had filled 2 pages. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. Marcus again. Dad, Claire and I talked, he said. We can swing by today if you want to go over next steps. Next steps. As if my life were a staircase, they were already halfway down. Not today. I replied calmly. I have appointments. With who? His tone tightened. With people who mind their business, I said, and ended the call. I dressed carefully. Pressed slacks, button-down shirt. The watch Eleanor had given me on our 40th anniversary. Not for vanity. For posture. People treat you differently when you remind them who you've been. My first stop was downtown Savannah, to an office Eleanor had written in her tidy handwriting, inside an old address book. Harold Whitman, estate law, trusts, quiet. The building was brick, modest, no flashy signage. The receptionist, a black woman in her 50s with silver-threaded braids, looked up and smiled like she'd already decided I belonged there. Mr. Carter? She asked. Mr. Whitman is ready for you. Harold Whitman was younger than I expected, mid-40s maybe, with tired eyes and a calm voice. He stood when I entered, shook my hand firmly. I'm sorry about Eleanor, he said. She was thorough. That she was... I replied, setting the blue folder on his desk. He opened it slowly, page by page, his expression changing not with shock, but with appreciation. The way a chess player looks at a board and realizes the other player has already thought 10 moves ahead. She transferred full ownership of the house to you 18 months ago, he said. Clean. Recorded. Your children have no legal interest. I didn't know. She didn't want you burdened, he said gently. She wanted you protected. He flipped to the Portugal documents and let out a low whistle. This is impressive. Offshore property. Privacy clauses. Staggered accounts. She wasn't hiding. She was preparing. I told him about Marcus and Claire. About buyers. About the basement plan. About the word conservatorship being floated like a threat. That made him stop. Did they say that directly? Yes. Did you record it? I met his eyes. I intend to. He nodded once. Good. He pulled a legal pad toward him. Here's what happens next. We lock down your property rights formally. Notices go out today. Real estate offices, county records, anyone who's been contacted. Your children will receive cease and desist letters. Polite, firm. And if they escalate, then we document. Because here's the thing, Mr. Carter, courts don't look kindly on adult children trying to remove autonomy from a competent parent, especially when money is involved. He leaned back. Eleanor anticipated this. She left notes, dates, patterns. She suspected pressure. Pressure. That was a kind word for what it felt like. When I left his office an hour later, I felt lighter, not relieved, but steadied. The ground beneath me was firm again. On the way home, I stopped by the post office and rented a P.O. box. Quiet moves matter. By noon, my phone had lit up with messages. Marcus, why are lawyers calling realtors? Claire, we're just trying to help you. Renee, Dad, please don't make this harder. Harder than what? Being erased politely? I didn't respond. That afternoon, I returned to Eleanor's study and reread her letter. Then I turned to the back page with the Portuguese contact. Sofia Mendez. I dialed. The line rang twice. Hola, a woman answered. Sophia Mendez? I asked. Yes. My name is Samuel Carter. Eleanor Carter was my wife. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. She told me you would call, Sophia said softly, when the pressure started. I closed my eyes. She helped my family, Sophia continued. Years ago, when no one else would, she saved us from being sent back when my children were small, paid legal fees, sat with us in court, never asked for anything. She mentioned that. I said, briefly. Sophia laughed quietly. That sounds like Eleanor. Always brief about her own kindness. We spoke for nearly an hour. About the villa, about the legal steps needed, about timing. The house is ready, Sophia said. Maintained. Private. Your name can be added the moment you arrive. Good, I replied. I may need distance. Yes, she said. Eleanor believed that sometimes distance is the only way to keep your voice. That evening, Marcus showed up unannounced. I was in the garden, trimming dead branches, when his SUV rolled into the driveway like it owned the space. He got out, jaw tight, eyes sharp. You didn't tell me you were meeting lawyers, he said as if that were an offense. I didn't need your permission. He followed me into the kitchen, his footsteps heavy. You're acting irrationally, he snapped. Claire is upset. Realtors are backing out. This is embarrassing. Embarrassing to whom? To us, he said. I set the clippers down. There it is. There what is? You didn't say you're worried about me. You said this is embarrassing. He scoffed. You're twisting things. No, I said calmly. I'm hearing them clearly. He paced. Dad, you're 73. You don't need a big house. You don't need complications. And you don't need my permission to want what's mine, I replied, but you do need it to take it. He stopped pacing. So, what? You shouldn't dig in? Fight us. I'm not fighting, I said. I'm standing. Claire arrived 10 minutes later, eyes red, posture stiff. This is unnecessary, she said. You're creating conflict. Conflict existed before I spoke. I replied, you just preferred it when I was quiet. Marcus slammed his hand on the counter. Fine. If you won't listen, we'll take other steps. Say them, I said. He hesitated. Claire stepped in. We're concerned about your decision-making capacity. I reached into my pocket and placed my phone on the table. Screen up, recording light, glowing red. The room froze. You're recording us? She whispered. I'm documenting. I said evenly. Marcus swallowed. Dad. Go on, I said. Say it clearly. Neither of them did. Good, I said. Then let me be clear. I leaned forward, voice steady. You will not sell my house. You will not redesign my life. You will not threaten me into submission. And if you try to involve courts, doctors, or banks to do it for you, every word spoken today will follow you. Marcus's face had gone pale. This isn't over, he said. You're right, I replied. It isn't. After they left, the house felt different, not empty, but reclaimed. That night, I called Naomi. She answered on the second ring. Grandpa! Naomi, I said, I need to ask you something important. Okay. The money you've been getting for college, do you know where it comes from? Silence. Mom said it was from them. She finally said. I exhaled slowly. It isn't, I said. It's from me. The truth cracked something open between us. By the time we hung up, I knew Eleanor had been right again. This wasn't just about property. It was about patterns. And patterns, once exposed, don't survive daylight. The truth has weight. Once it's spoken, it doesn't disappear. It settles. Sometimes gently. Sometimes like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples farther than anyone expects. After my conversation with Naomi, I didn't sleep, not because of fear, but because something had shifted. Eleanor used to say that when lies are exposed, the people who depended on them become unpredictable. She was right. The next morning, my phone exploded before 8. Missed calls from Marcus, text from Claire, a voicemail from Renee that I didn't open. I ignored them all. Instead, I put on my coat and drove across town to the Savannah Medical Center, not as a patient, but as a man protecting his future. Eleanor had once dragged me there for a full cognitive evaluation after I joked about forgetting where I parked car. I'd teased her for weeks about it. Now I was grateful. Dr. Alan Brooks still worked there. Same calm demeanor. Same habit of listening more than he spoke. I need a full assessment, I told him. Documented. Thorough. He studied my face. You anticipating trouble? I'm anticipating assumptions, I replied. The evaluation took 3 hours. Memory, reasoning, comprehension, financial scenarios. I answered calmly, methodically. When it was over, Dr. Brooks smiled. Mr. Carter, he said, signing the final page, you're sharper than most men 20 years younger. Please put that in writing. I said. He did. By the time I left the building, Harold Whitman had already emailed me copies of the cease and desist letters. Realtors were backing away like birds startled from a wire. County records were updated. Ownership locked. Still Marcus pushed. At noon, Renee showed up alone. She stood on the porch for a full minute before knocking. When I opened the door, her eyes filled instantly. Daddy, she said, please. I stepped aside and let her in. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Guilty. She sat at the kitchen table. Fingers wrapped around a mug she hadn't asked for. They're saying you've lost perspective, she said quietly. That you're isolating. Is that what you believe? I asked. She hesitated. Too long. I believe we're all scared, she admitted. Mom's gone. You're alone. Marcus is under pressure. Claire thinks. Claire thinks in numbers, I interrupted gently. Not people. Renee flinched. She doesn't mean harm, she said automatically. No, I agreed. She means efficiency. Renee swallowed. Naomi called me last night. I nodded. And she was crying. Renee whispered. She said the money, that it was you, that we let her believe. She deserved the truth, I said. Renee nodded slowly. Yes, she did. Silence stretched between us. I don't want to lose you, she finally said. Then stop trying to manage me. I replied. See me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know how. I softened my voice. Start by asking instead of deciding. She left an hour later. Not angry, not resolved, but thinking. That was enough for now. 2 days later, Harold called. They're testing boundaries, he said. Quietly. How? Marcus contacted a financial advisor asking about protecting family assets. Claire requested information on elder care assessments. I laughed once. Not humor. Recognition. They're circling, I said. Yes, Harold replied. But they're nervous. That's good. That afternoon, I made my move. I called Rodriguez Moving and Storage. I need a pickup, I told the dispatcher. Early morning. Precision matters. She laughed. It always does. I gave her the address. Marcus's address. The items were already boxed. Things that had been sitting in my attic, garage, closets for decades. Trophies. Old furniture. Childhood memorabilia. Boxes labeled neatly with Marcus's name. At exactly 7:30 a.m. the next day, the truck rolled down Willowcrest Drive. I parked 3 houses away and watched. Neighbors emerged like clockwork. Joggers slowed. Curtains twitched. Rodriguez's crew worked efficiently. Each box carried a typed note. These items have been stored at my residence for over 20 years. I am returning them, so you may manage your own property. Samuel Carter. Marcus answered the door in a bathrobe. Claire appeared moments later, face pale. By the time the last box was unloaded, half the street had an audience. My phone rang as I pulled away. What the hell is wrong with you? Marcus shouted. Nothing, I said calmly. I returned your belongings. You humiliated us. I respected ownership, I replied. Something you should appreciate. Silence. You made us look like freeloaders, Claire snapped in the background. Then explain why getting your own things back feels that way. I said and hung up. The move did exactly what Eleanor would have predicted. It forced a narrative they couldn't control. Later that afternoon, Marcus stormed into my house using the spare key he'd never returned. Claire followed, mascara streaked, rage barely contained. "This is sick," Marcus shouted. "You're playing games." "No," I said calmly, seated at the table with Eleanor's blue folder open. "I'm teaching." "Teaching what?" Claire demanded. The difference between access and entitlement. I slid a document across the table. Marcus grabbed it, his face drained of color. "A trust?" he whispered. "A conservation trust. I corrected. Filed 6 months before Eleanor passed." Claire's hands trembled. "That's not possible." "It is," I said, "and it's irrevocable." I watched the realization spread slowly, painfully. "The house," Marcus said hoarsely. "You can't sell it?" "No," I replied. "Nor can I mortgage it. Nor can you touch it." Claire shook her head. "Then who?" "Naomi," I said. The word landed like a verdict. "She'll inherit stewardship when she turns 25. I continued, along with funds set aside for maintenance. Marcus stood abruptly. "You're cutting us out." "No," I said evenly. "You cut yourselves out." Claire's voice broke. "After everything we've done?" "Exactly," I replied. I stood and opened a front door. "I think we're finished." They left in silence. That night, Naomi called. "I'm coming to see you," she said. "When?" "Soon." I smiled. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane. Portugal waited, and so did consequences. Distance doesn't weaken truth. It sharpens it. The plane lifted from Atlanta just after dusk, banking east over a carpet of lights that looked like a map of promises people kept making to themselves. I watched the ground recede until it became abstraction. Somewhere down there were Marcus and Claire, pacing rooms full of things they'd assumed would one day be theirs. Somewhere else was a house Eleanor and I had built, safe, protected, untouchable. And ahead of me, across an ocean, was silence with purpose. I slept little on the flight, not from nerves, but from anticipation. Eleanor used to say there's a difference between running away and stepping aside. One is fear. The other is strategy. When we landed in Faro, the air smelled like salt and citrus. The kind of air that insists you breathe deeper whether you intend to or not. Sophia Mendez waited near the terminal exit, small and composed, holding a simple sign, Carter. She smiled when she saw me, the smile of someone greeting an old friend through a promise kept. "You came," she said, embracing me like family. "I told you I would," I replied. The drive to Lagos wound through low hills and whitewashed villages, blue shutters catching the sun. Sophia spoke sparingly, pointing out markets, the hospital, the post office, practical landmarks, foundations. Eleanor would have approved. The villa sat just beyond town, modest in size, dignified in posture, white walls, red tile roof, a lemon tree in the courtyard, heavy with fruit. Eleanor chose this herself, Sophia said. She said it felt honest. Inside, the house was cool and quiet, furnished but not staged, lived in without being claimed. Fresh linens, a stocked kitchen, a desk near a window overlooking the sea. On the desk sat an envelope with my name, Eleanor's handwriting unmistakable. I didn't open it right away. That first night, I sat on the terrace and listened to the water. No sirens, no engines, no phones ringing with entitlement. Just waves, repeating a lesson older than any of us. Persistence doesn't need permission. The next morning, Sophia took me to Lisbon. The law office was efficient, discreet. Papers signed. Ownership clarified. Accounts activated. My name added where Eleanor had left space for it. She planned carefully, the attorney said, not to hide assets, to protect autonomy. Autonomy, a word Americans throw around until it becomes decoration. Here it felt structural. By afternoon, everything was done. I walked back onto the street with no one able to tell by looking at me that my life had just shifted irrevocably. That evening, I finally opened Eleanor's letter. "Sam," it began, "if you're reading this here, it means you trusted yourself. I'm proud of you already. This house is not an escape. It's a pause. A place to remember that your worth was never conditional. Let them reveal themselves from a distance. Truth travels faster when you stop caring for others. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back on the desk. Back home, truth was traveling fast. Harold emailed 2 days later. Subject line escalation. Marcus had filed a petition. Not conservatorship. Not yet. Something subtler. A request for financial oversight due to concerns about international influence. Claire's fingerprints were all over it. Harold dismantled it in 48 hours. Lack of standing, he wrote. Speculative harm. Clear evidence of competency. Petition dismissed. Marcus didn't take the loss quietly. Renee called. Her voice was tight. They're saying you've been manipulated. That someone overseas is controlling you. I laughed softly. By that logic, Eleanor controlled me for 45 years. That's not funny, Renee said. No, I agreed, but it's telling. Naomi called later that night. They're freaking out, she said. Mom keeps asking if you're okay. Dad keeps saying you're being unreasonable. And what do you think? She didn't hesitate. I think they're scared because they can't reach you. Good, I said gently. That means they're finally listening to something other than themselves. Naomi arrived a week later. She stepped into the villa like someone crossing a threshold she'd been preparing for without knowing it. She stood in the courtyard, turned slowly, took it all in. This feels right, she said. That's how your grandmother felt. I replied. Sophia had prepared a room for her. On the desk inside was another envelope. Eleanor's handwriting again. Naomi read it alone. When she emerged, her eyes were bright, not with tears but with clarity. She knew, Naomi said, about everything. About me, about them. Yes, I said. She trusted you. We settled into rhythm quickly. Mornings at the bakery. Afternoons studying Portuguese. Evenings on the terrace. Naomi bloomed in ways I hadn't seen before. Freed from the pressure to perform gratitude, she became curious, engaged, honest. She asked questions not about money, but about choices, about boundaries, about what it means to walk away without bitterness. One afternoon, as we returned from the market, my phone buzzed. Claire. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Polite, controlled. Samuel, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I deleted it. That night, Harold called again. They've hired new counsel, he said. More aggressive. And sloppier. They're pushing narratives that contradict their own filings. It won't hold. Let them, I replied. 2 weeks later, the truth reached their neighborhood. A former realtor, annoyed at being dragged into legal noise, mentioned casually at a block party that the house on Maple Ridge was never for sale, that the elderly owner was perfectly competent, and that his children had been warned to stop interfering. Stories don't need details to spread. They need friction. Marcus's image cracked first. Claire's followed. David's job, built on perception, started to wobble. That was when the emails began. Long ones. Emotional ones. Accusatory ones. Apologetic ones. I didn't reply. Distance did what arguments never could. It forced reflection without resistance. One evening, Naomi and I sat watching the sun lower into the Atlantic. Do you miss them? She asked. I miss who they were, I said, not who they chose to become. She nodded. I think Grandma understood that. She did, I said, and she wanted you to understand it sooner than I did. Naomi took a breath. I want to stay longer. Maybe study here. Law, maybe international. I smiled. That sounded like Eleanor. Months passed. Marcus's petition was formally dismissed with prejudice, meaning he couldn't try again. Claire stopped calling. Renee kept writing. Slowly, carefully, without demands. I answered once. We spoke for an hour. About accountability. About therapy. About unlearning. She didn't ask for anything. That mattered. 1 year after I left, Harold called with a final update. They're divorcing, he said. Messy. Public. I closed my eyes briefly. That's unfortunate, I said. And I meant it, Not with guilt, but with acceptance. Some structures collapse when they're built on borrowed ground. That night, Naomi and I cooked dinner together. She chopped vegetables. I seasoned fish. The lemon tree outside rustled in the breeze. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, "but understanding isn't required for peace." She smiled. "The sea answer for us, patient and endless. Time does something strange when it's no longer measured by obligation. Days stretch. Thoughts deepen. You start noticing which memories bring warmth and which ones only bring noise. Portugal gave me that gift, the space to separate love from habit. By the second spring, Naomi no longer felt like a visitor. She moved through the village with the ease of someone who belonged, greeting neighbors in confident Portuguese, stopping to help old men carry groceries, laughing easily with Sophia's grandchildren as if they'd grown up together. Watching her was like watching Eleanor's foresight come to life. One morning, as Naomi prepared notes for her university applications, she looked up from the table and said, "Grandpa, I got an email from Mom." I didn't ask what it said. I waited. "She wants a visit," Naomi continued. "Just her. No Dad. No Claire." That was new. "What do you want?" I asked. Naomi thought carefully. "I want to see if she can talk without trying to fix or take." That answer told me everything. Renee arrived 2 weeks later, alone, carrying a single suitcase and a posture stripped of certainty. At the airport, she looked smaller than I remembered, not diminished, just unarmored. When she saw Naomi, she hesitated before hugging her, as if asking permission with her eyes. Naomi stepped forward and hugged her first. The villa held its breath. The first evening was cautious. We ate together, spoke of small things. The weather, the food, the village. No one mentioned the house, the trust, the petitions, or the words that had cut deepest. It was Renee who finally broke. "I went to therapy," she said quietly, staring into her glass. "Not to get you back. To understand why I thought I was entitled to decide your life." I didn't interrupt. "I learned something ugly," she continued. "I learned that I confused care with control, because control made me feel safe." Naomi watched her mother closely, not hostile, not open, measuring. Renee turned to her. "I lied to you. About the money. About who was carrying whom. I taught you guilt when you should have felt gratitude. Not toward me, but toward honesty." Naomi didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was calm. "I don't need you to feel ashamed," she said. "I need you to stop pretending." Renee nodded. "I'm trying." The next morning, Renee asked to walk with me. We followed the narrow path down toward the cliffs, sea spray rising with each wave. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of ending up like you and Mom, strong but tired. I wanted security without realizing I was stealing yours." I stopped walking. "You didn't steal my security," I said. "You threatened my dignity. Those are different." She swallowed. "I see that now." We stood in silence, the ocean doing what it had always done, outlasting our worst instincts. "I'm not coming back," I said finally, "and I'm not undoing what Eleanor set in place." "I know," Renee said. "I'm not asking." That mattered more than the apology. Her visit lasted 5 days. She didn't overstay. She didn't push. She listened more than she spoke. When she left, she hugged Naomi tightly. "I'm proud of you," she said, "even when it hurts." After Renee left, Naomi sat with me on the terrace. "She's changing," Naomi said. "She's trying." I replied, "Change is what sticks." Months passed. Naomi was accepted into the University of Lisbon's International Law program. She celebrated quietly, the way Eleanor would have, without spectacle, with resolve. On her 20th birthday, the trust Eleanor had seeded matured further. Naomi didn't rush to spend it. She asked questions instead. "What did Grandma hope I'd do with this?" she asked me one evening. "She hoped you'd choose," I said, "not react." Naomi smiled. "Then I want to fund legal aid clinics for immigrant families here, and save the rest." I nodded. That sounds like Eleanor. Back in Georgia, Marcus and Claire's divorce became final. Harold forwarded the public filing. not to gloat, but to inform. Marcus tried once more to reach me. An email this time. Short, careful. I didn't understand what I was doing until it was gone. I didn't reply. Understanding doesn't always require reconciliation. One afternoon, Naomi received a message from her father. She read it silently, then handed me the phone. I don't know what to do, she said. I read it once. He wants forgiveness, I said, but he hasn't asked for accountability. Naomi nodded. That's what it feels like. What do you want to offer? I asked. She thought. Distance. That's fair, I said. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Naomi asked me a question I've been waiting for. Grandpa, she said, do you regret leaving? I looked out at the horizon. No, I said, I regret waiting so long to stand still. She smiled softly. The villa glowed in the fading light, walls holding warmth, silence holding peace. Eleanor had been right. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you refuse to surrender while you're still here. There's a moment, usually quiet, when you realize no one is coming to take something from you anymore, not because they've learned better, but because they've learned they can't. That realization came to me on an ordinary Tuesday. Naomi had already left for class, the house still warm from morning sunlight. I was trimming the lemon tree when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in months. Marcus. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. No anger. No accusation. Just exhaustion. Dad, I don't know how to fix this. Claire's gone. The house feels empty. I keep thinking if Mom were here, she'd know what to say. I don't. I just call me. I listened once. Then again. Eleanor would have said silence is also a response. I didn't call back. Instead, I went inside and opened the final section of the blue folder. The part I'd avoided, not because I feared it, but because I hadn't needed it yet. Inside was one last document, a conditional letter. Eleanor had labeled it carefully, for the moment when they finally stopped demanding and start asking. I read it slowly. Sam, if this letter is open, it means the storm has passed. They may sound smaller now. Regret often does that. Before you decide what to give back, remember this. Remorse without repair is only grief looking for relief. Don't confuse exhaustion with growth. True change shows up when it costs them something. I closed the folder. That afternoon, Harold called. They're testing one final angle, he said. Not legal this time. Emotional. How so? Marcus contacted Naomi's university. Asked about her funding. Claimed concern. My jaw tightened. That crosses a line. I said, yes, Harold replied. And it helps us. He explained calmly. Marcus's inquiry had been flagged, documented, and shut down. But more importantly, it created a paper trail. One last attempt to reach into a future that was no longer his to manage. I told Naomi that evening. She didn't look surprised. He still thinks proximity equals authority, she said. Do you want to confront him? I asked. She shook her head. I wanted to understand without me explaining. That was Eleanor's wisdom speaking through her. 2 days later, Marcus showed up in Portugal. I didn't know he was coming until Sophia called. There's a man asking for you, she said carefully. He looks broken. I went to the terrace and waited. Marcus walked up the path slowly, suitcase in hand, shoulders slumped. The man approaching me wasn't the confident strategist who'd once tried to sell my house. He looked older, smaller. Dad, he said. I didn't invite him inside. We sat outside, the sea between us, and everything we hadn't said. I lost everything, he began. You lost control, I corrected gently. Those are not the same. He swallowed. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. You meant to manage me. Silence. I thought I was being responsible, he said. You thought you were entitled. I replied. Responsibility asked permission. He looked down. I don't know how to come back from this. You don't, I said honestly. You go forward differently. He looked up, eyes wet. Is there any way to fix this? I thought of Eleanor's letter. Yes, I said, but it doesn't involve me giving you anything. What does it involve? Letting go. He frowned. Of what? He asked. Of the belief that family is something you control, I said. Of the idea that love entitles you to access. Of the habit of counting other people's lives as resources. He nodded slowly, the truth landing heavier than any accusation. I came here to ask for forgiveness, he said. I'm not withholding it. I replied, I'm just not offering reconciliation. The distinction stunned him. You forgive someone so you can be free, I continued. You reconcile only when they've proven they won't repeat the harm. He sat there a long time. I don't deserve to be here, he finally said. No, I agreed, but you deserve to hear the truth. He left the next morning. No drama, no argument, just departure. When Naomi returned from class and saw the empty chair, she understood immediately. Was he here? She asked. Yes. Did he listen? He heard. I said, listening takes longer. Weeks passed. Naomi thrived. Her professors noticed. One invited her to assist on a cross-border immigration case. Another encouraged her to publish a paper. She's exceptional, one wrote to me. Grounded, ethical, unafraid. That night, Naomi asked if she could read Eleanor's final letter. I handed it to her. She read it slowly, then looked up. She didn't just protect you, Naomi said. She protected me from becoming like them. Yes, I replied. She protected the future. On the anniversary of Eleanor's passing, we planted another lemon tree beside the first. Naomi pressed the soil down gently. For growth, she said. For patience, I added. That evening, as the sun disappeared into the Atlantic, Naomi spoke quietly. I think I know what legacy really means now. I waited. It's not what you pass down, she said. It's what you refuse to pass on. I smiled. That night, I wrote one final letter. Not to Marcus, not to Claire, not even to Renee. To myself. I wrote about the man I had been when I thought love meant endurance. About the man I became when I learned love also means refusal. I sealed it and placed it in the blue folder. Finally complete. The house was quiet. Not lonely. Whole. Time answers questions without asking permission. It does not rush. It does not explain. It simply reveals what lasts. 2 years pass in Lagos the way good music does. Slow enough to hear every note. Steady enough to trust the rhythm. The villa became a home not because we claimed it, but because it claimed us back. The lemon trees bore fruit twice a year now. Naomi's Portuguese shifted from careful to conversational to instinctive. And I learned something I hadn't expected at 75. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the absence of fear. On quiet mornings, I sat at the small desk Eleanor had chosen and wrote. Not letters to anyone in particular. Just memories, lessons, things I wished I'd understood sooner. I wrote about my parents, about growing up in South Georgia, about learning early that dignity had to be defended because no one handed it to you freely. I wrote about Eleanor, how she never raised her voice, but never lowered her standards either. How she prepared for storms while others pretended the sky was always clear. Naomi read sometimes over my shoulder. Other times she didn't ask. She had learned the value of letting people keep parts of themselves private. Her studies intensified. Immigration law became more than coursework. It became conviction. She spent weekends translating documents for families who reminded her of Sophia's story, of Eleanor's quiet generosity. She learned how systems bend depending on who stands in front of them, and she learned how to stand anyway. One afternoon, she came home earlier than usual, eyes bright. I was off a research placement, she said. 6 months. Brussels. I smiled before she finished. You're going. She hesitated. What about you? I'll be exactly where I am. I said, rooted doesn't mean stuck. She hugged me hard, the way she used when she was small, and thought hugs could fix everything. Maybe they still can. That night, as we cooked dinner together, Naomi asked a question she'd been circling for months. Grandpa, do you think they hate you now? I considered it carefully. I think they hate that they can't define me anymore. She nodded. I don't hate them. That's good, I said. Hatred keeps you tied to the past. Silence settled, comfortable, and earned. Back in Georgia, life continued without us. Renee kept her distance, but she stayed honest. Therapy had become a discipline, not a performance. She sent letters instead of demands, updates instead of expectations. When she spoke to Naomi, she listened more than she advised. That alone marked real change. Marcus wrote once more. Short, plain. I'm learning how to live without leverage. I read it twice, then placed it in the folder without response. Some acknowledgments are enough. Claire never reached out again. Her absence was not an apology, but it was a boundary she finally respected. And that, too, mattered. On my 76th birthday, Naomi returned from Brussels for a weekend. She brought bread from a bakery she loved there. Cheese she insisted was life-changing, and a confidence that could only come from standing on her own ground. We celebrated quietly. No speeches. No pictures posted online. Just a meal, laughter, and the sea breathing beside us. Later that night, Naomi handed me an envelope. I wrote something, she said. For you. Inside was a letter written in careful ink. Grandpa, you once asked me what I wanted to offer my parents. I didn't know then. Now I do. I want to offer them proof. Proof that honesty doesn't destroy families. Control does. Proof that walking away can be an act of love. Proof that Grandma was right about everything. Thank you for choosing yourself. It gave me permission to choose myself too. I folded the letter slowly. You know, I said, your grandmother planned all of this. Naomi smiled. I know. She just needed you to finish it. That winter, my health faltered briefly. Not dramatically, not dangerously. Just enough to remind me that time is generous, but not endless. Naomi insisted on coming home early. I insisted she didn't need to. She came anyway. We spent afternoons walking shorter paths now, resting more often. I taught her the recipes Eleanor never wrote down. She taught me the Portuguese names for things I'd always known but never named properly. One evening, as the sky darkened and the lights of fishing boats flickered on the horizon, Naomi asked quietly, "Are you afraid?" "No," I said honestly. I was afraid before. Afraid of disappointing people who were already disappointed. Afraid of being alone in a crowded room. Afraid of becoming invisible in my own life. And now I'm seen, I said, even when I'm quiet. That spring, we added a third lemon tree to the garden. For continuity, Naomi said. For trust, I replied. Years later, long after the anger faded, long after the accusations lost their bite, I understood what Eleanor had really given me. Not Portugal, not money, not even protection. She gave me timing. She knew when to prepare, when to wait, and when to let people reveal themselves without interference. She trusted that truth, once uncovered, would do the work she no longer could. And she trusted me to finish the story. On my last visit to Lisbon, I updated my own documents. Simple, clear, Naomi as steward, Sophia as family remembered. A scholarship fund quietly expanded. No drama, no loopholes. That night, back at the villa, I placed the blue folder in the drawer one final time. Complete. When the sea was loud and sleep came slowly, I thought about the man I'd been when this began. Sitting at a kitchen table while my children tried to reduce my life to square footage and spreadsheets. That man believed love meant endurance. This man knew better. Love also means boundaries. Love also means refusal. Love also means choosing dignity, even when it costs you comfort. I had not lost my family. I had filtered it. And what remained, what chose to remain, was real. On my 81st birthday, Naomi stood beside me on the terrace, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly before us. I think Grandma would be proud, she said. I know she is, I replied, because legacy is not what you leave behind when you die. It's what you protect while you're still alive. And sometimes the bravest thing an old man can do is prove, quietly, decisively, that his life still belongs to him. If my story stayed with you, take a moment before you go, support the channel by subscribing, and leave a comment sharing where you're watching from. Stories like this travel farther when you help carry them.